have you, and I'll introduce myself. My name is Kevin Saas. I'm the winemaker at Halter Ranch. I will forewarn you, my professionalism is in winemaking, not IT, so I'm likely to muff this presentation up because I've got a PowerPoint that will help you see some things that I think will be interesting for you. We've got a presentation about the property and also a little bit about winemaking, and then of course tasting the wines that you have with you today. And we'll also have a little bit of a Q&A session as we go along. I'll have to find that probably get out of this and see if that shows up on the side. Otherwise, I do have a IT person here who's going to help me with all that. So we'll start real quick with a little bit of housekeeping. You have two wines that Dave sent you, our 21 CDP and our 2021 CDP and 2020 Cabernet. So go ahead, if you haven't already, pop them both. You can use separate glasses if you want. Probably not super important, but the first one you're going to pour is the CDP, which we'll get to in a second. You feel free to pour it if you want, and you can even start trying it. But I'm going to explain the wine a little bit more in a few minutes because I'm going to get through the first part of the presentation. And then when you move to the second wine, one thing that I would suggest that you do that I tell people quite often is do not rinse out with water, because the water, the pH of water is, as most of you know, around 7. And so rinsing with water is actually bad and will actually make the other wine that you put in there worse because it's raising its pH levels and diluting flavors. So I would prefer you finish your CDP, and then basically after that move to the cab, just go ahead and pour it right in. Just make sure all of it's out of the glass. And by the way, do you guys need wine? Yeah. I have it here. Sure. Help yourself. These glasses are for you. So you can want to pour your CDP so I can continue. Sure. Actually, you can pour mine. Okay. Sure. Thank you. So again, my name is Kevin. I'm from Halter Ranch, the winemaker here. I've been here for almost 15 years now, and we're located in Paso Robles, which is a little bit different location than most of you are probably used to from a winemaking standpoint. A lot of people are familiar with Napa Valley, which of course is kind of the showcase of California. But we're actually located halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles. I'm going to show you this fly-in, and hopefully it works well, but if it doesn't, you'll get the gist of it when you see the finished product here. So let me share my screen. Okay. All right, so this is our winery here that you see, kind of a top aerial picture of Halter Ranch, and that's our winery and our tasting room. And we're actually in the caves, which are underneath that green hill that you see behind the winery. So thank you, sir. So what the property looks like. It's really basic property. I'm going to show you some more details.
No, just that. Yeah, they're recording. So we can watch it later.
Presentation. Yeah, are you in PowerPoint?
Yeah. I don't know. Am I in PowerPoint?
No, click that one.
Okay.
And then in the presentation.
This one?
Yeah. Oh wait. Is that it?
Oh, I see down there.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. All right, let's see if this works. From a million miles away, here we are in outer space flying into the looks of California. And so you can see this is the area of San Luis Obispo, which is where our winery is located. And on this map, you've got Halter Ranch, which is located in the top left, which is near the town of Paso Robles, and we're more in the mountain range. And what I find fascinating about this, some of you might have saw on the news that there was a huge earthquake off of the coast of Northern California. So that's on the other side of San Francisco from where we are. We're on the southern part. So just north of us to the left is some really cool landmarks like Hearst Castle, Highway 1, Big Sur. And but what's interesting that I want to show you is a little bit more, most importantly about this map that you have here, is that on the top right of it, you can see that there's a mountain range. And speaking of earthquakes, that's a lot heavy section of green. And then to the right, you have what's called the San Joaquin Valley. And the San Joaquin Valley is where California grows a lot of its food. And what's fascinating about this mountain range, which really delineates your ability to grow wine, grapes, versus other places like in the San Joaquin Valley or Las Vegas or some of those other places, is this mountain range. Because this mountain range is a mountain range that was created by the San Andreas Fault. And so the San Andreas Fault, which is essentially what causes earthquakes for the most part in California, lifted this mountain range into place over obviously millions and billions of years. And what has happened as a result is that as weather comes in, cool weather from the ocean comes in, it sits down in our section of the property, which allows ours to have diurnal shifts in our temperatures. Because people often say, why can't we grow wine grapes in Las Vegas or Fresno or Utah? Because we obviously are clearly warm enough. But the problem is that the nighttime temperatures need to get low to create good quality wine grapes. And I'll explain that a little bit more. But basically what happens is the temperatures are fine to ripen the grapes, but a grapevine continues to ripen its grapes if it's above 55 to 60 degrees, meaning that the sugar accumulation continues to increase. And the problem with that, if you don't let the vine quiet down and go to sleep, is that the grapevine will ripen so fast that you won't able to turn those red grapes, the skins won't gain color. It would be kind of like I use the analogy of basically getting a suntan, right? So if you go out, you want to get a long, slow tan, you don't want to go out in 110-degree weather and get a tan. You know, you want to go in 85-degree weather, put sunscreen on and get a real solid base tan. And what happens is if you continue to ripen, you go 110-degree weather, you have to get out of it because it gets too hot too fast. You can't do that. And essentially the grapes of the skins of grapevines or of grapes are the same concept. They need that color because that color is where you make the red wine from, which I'm going to show you a little bit more data on how all that works, okay? So getting back to this map, this mountain range basically has allowed the Paso Robles, San Luis Obispo area to become a great wine growing area because it creates a barrier between the San Joaquin Valley and what we call the Central Coast of California. So whenever it gets hot in that San Joaquin Valley, the air rises and the ocean air will come in and it will cool it down. And it stays in our area, which also dictates to us slightly cooler temperatures than you would in what is otherwise known as a desert. Okay, so it's a fascinating growing region. All of the growing regions that you find in unique state-of-the-art wine growing regions, like in Bordeaux, in Chablis, in Napa, in Sonoma, in Santa Barbara, all of them have some facet of a cooling diurnal shift dynamic that happens. And this is basically the way ours works. Napa works a little bit differently with the bay, the San Francisco Bay. Chablis works a little differently with some of the mountains up there. So Bordeaux works the same way with the estuary that's above it. So all of these different wine growing regions have something different that create and make it a unique wine growing region. So I thought that was kind of important for people to see. So moving on to the next slide, this is us flying into a little bit more detail of the Paso Robles AVA, which is where we're located. So just south of us is basically what we call the grade, and you go over the bottom of the Santa Lucia mountain range, which is like kind of the point that you see on the bottom of this AVA. And below that is San Luis Obispo County, and interestingly enough, it's cool enough down there to grow Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, where in our area, we're predominantly red varietals, both in the Rhone and the Bordeaux category, meaning Cabernet Sauvignon, Petit Verdot, Malbec, Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre. Those are some of the wines that we're trying today. And then even within our own microclimate of the Paso Robles AVA, you can see that there's a lot of flat land in the middle of Paso Robles, and that's basically where you would find a lot of the wineries that you might be more familiar with, which is the J. Lours, the Hope family, Dow. Some of the Justin wines come from that area. So it's a little bit flatter, a little bit less rainfall, a little bit different soil types. One of the most prolific areas of Paso Robles is the Adelaida district, which is that top circled area that you see. And that's where we're located, along with Justin's main property. And there's some other really well-known wineries that sit on the top in our area as well. So, and what's different about our area is that we're basically in a mountain range that ranges anywhere from 1,200 to 2,000 feet. Where if you go on the other side of the town, it's all flat. There's not a lot of hillsides. The soils are a little sandier. So the growing conditions are definitely different. They can create a lot more grapes out there, which sometimes limits the quality, where we're kind of restricted to what we can do on our hills because our soil types, the hillsides, the climate out here kind of dictates more quality. And what's it's not situation where it's east versus west or that side versus this side. Both the market and the grape market and the land market also dictate that people buying in our area in the Adeleda district are generally getting a higher price for land values, for wine values, and grape values. All right. So this is a little bit about the Paso Robles APA and our area in general. Again, getting back to some of the landmarks, if you're ever to come visit Paso Robles, it's an amazing place to come see. I know a lot of people go to Napa Valley as their quote unquote, wine trip, which is always fun and interesting because it is Napa Valley. But if you aren't as interested in some of the pricing that takes place up there, and if you're not interested in some of the traffic and the amount of people that are visiting there at one time, you can certainly come visit our area because we do have a large volume of wineries out here. There's over 300 wineries in our area. There's some really cool things to visit beyond wine tasting. You got Highway 1, Big Sur. If you want to go from Monterey down to our area, you can drive, along that coastline. Hearst Castle. If you're familiar with Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, it's a great place. And then even beyond, just another 20 minutes south of us, is San Luis Obispo, which has Pismo Beach, Avila Beach. It has the ocean. There's some great boardwalks. There's some good golf and things like that. So it's definitely worth a visit to this part of the country if you've never tasted wine in this area and want to do something a little bit different. Oh, I pressed the back button? Okay. So we're going to try the first wine. I know some of you have probably already dove into that. I am going to go through this and then talk a little bit about winemaking. So the first one that you have in front of us is called a Halter Ranch CDP. So CDP stands for Côte de Paso, which got a little bit hard to say, so we abbreviated the label about 10 years ago and just called it CDP. And it's actually what we call one of the winery's wine. And I say that because everybody who works here is a big fan favorite of this one. It's a really easy drinking wine, and I'll explain a little bit more about why that's the place, or why that's particular taste of this wine in a minute as we get into the processing standpoint. But it's a blend of Grenache, Syrah, Tannat, and Mourvedre. And so Grenache, I'm going to talk again a little bit more about the winemaking part of it, is a big high fruit varietal. It's got a lot of color, lots of red fruit flavors. Syrah a little bit darker, a little bit more in the blue category. Tannat is, I kind of joke, is like the saffron of the wine world. And then you got Mourvedre, which has a lot of red fruits. And so when I give you all these descriptors, you might sit there and say, well, like, I don't understand, what all this means. Take my screen off. And talk to you a little bit about that. So I always try to tell people, and this is going to get into the winemaking part of it right now. So if you got your glass in front of you, you can take a look at this. And one thing that you'll notice, you can see that it's got color to it, and it's got red color to it, but it's not like it's inky black, right? Which is, you're going to see, is a little bit different than, say, the Cabernet that you have behind us, which we're going to try here in a little bit. And I want to talk a little bit about how this is all made and how it works. So feel free to give it a swirl, give it a sniff. I usually associate this wine. It's got a lot of kind of dried fruits, some rose petal. There's some Bing cherry profiles in there. Really easy. You take a sip of it. And it's got nice bright fruit. A little bit of acid to maintain. Good to pair food with, charcuterie, meats. Softer meats, more rabbit, duck, pork, things like that. But what's nice about it is it's a very easy finish, right? If you try it again, you're going to see that it's very clean on the finish. It doesn't have a lot of tannin structure. So you might say, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, the fruit profile you could probably understand, right? That's pretty straightforward. You look for those smells in the wine. But the tannin structure is something that we talk about in wine, where if you try the wine and it kind of dries your mouth out, meaning that like maybe your tongue kind of sticks to the roof of your mouth, or it feels a little bit dry, that basically means tannins, okay? And there's two different types of tannins, but we're just going to talk generically right now in tannins in general. And the tannins generally come from the grapes themselves. So you're going to have some wines that are really low in tannin structure, like Pinot Noir and some other things, Zinfandel, Malbec, Merlot. You're going to have other ones that are higher. And so to get back to that, I want to start from the very beginning and talk a little bit about color. Because when you look at this wine, again, if you put it on a white background, you can't really see through it, but like Pinot Noir, it's not super, super dark, right? And so where does that come from? So if you were to harvest a grape of Cabernet Sauvignon or Grenache, I'm talking about red grapes right now, and you put it in your hand and you squeeze it, clear juice comes out, okay? It's the juice is not red, but the skin is. And that's really what's important when it comes to ripening grapes in the vineyard, is to make sure that you can get as much color in those skins as possible. And that color is formed by having a little bit of sun on it and extending the amount of time the sun sees those skins over the growing season. Okay, so again, if you're in Las Vegas or Fresno or somewhere where it's really hot during the daytime in summer and it doesn't cool down at night, that grapevine continues to ripen, but at the nighttime, that berry is not getting hit by the sun, so that skin is not developing, and you need those skins to develop to make good quality wine. Okay, and why is that the situation? And this is why. Okay, so when we make wine, we take off the grapes off of the plants, all usually between Labor Day and Halloween, plus or minus depending on the vintage. It might shift one week or another. Okay, and what happens is we get the stems off through a machine, and we take the grapes and we slightly break them, okay, and we put them into a tank. So now some of that juice has come out of those grapes, but inside that tank, you basically have all the skins from the grapes, all the seeds from all the grapes, and then you have all the juice. And the juice, right when you harvest it, is generally clear, okay? And you have to get your flavor out of the skins. So the grapes have not been turned into wine yet. You have basically grapes that have a tank with a whole bunch of grapes. It's got high levels of sugar in it, what we measure in what are called bricks. Usually we harvest anywhere between 25 and 27 degrees bricks, and that's all the sugar in there. So what we do is we add a little bit of yeast to it, and it starts fermenting. And once it starts fermenting, we basically take the juice and we start mixing the tank, okay? So once you start mixing the tank and the fermentation starts happening, the yeast will start converting the sugar to alcohol, okay? The secondary byproduct of that conversion of sugar to alcohol is also CO2, which is carbon dioxide. And what happens is, inside that tank, as the carbon dioxide forms during fermentation, basically the CO2 starts pushing all the skins to the top, okay? So now inside the tank, you have 2/3 of it is the juice, which is turning into wine because the yeast is converting the sugar to alcohol. And then you have the skins at the top third of the tank. And so we have to continue to pump the juice up and over the top of it. And I use the analogy of a coffee percolator, right? The same thing where you make coffee in the morning. If you're using a regular coffee machine, you're taking water, putting it over the top of grinds and getting the flavor out of that coffee. Well, the concept is the same thing in when you're making wine. You're basically taking that juice and you're putting it over the top over and over again, trying to get all the flavor you can and all the color you can out of those skins, because that's where your flavor in wine comes from, okay? That's where all this red, that's where all the flavor comes from. The pigments basically have what we call anthocyanins, which is all the flavor profiles. So if you were to make wine by just putting it in the tank and letting it ferment, you wouldn't have a lot of color and you wouldn't have a lot of flavor in your wine. It would taste almost like nothing. It would be alcohol with barely any flavors. So that's what's really important about this concept. And what I want to explain to you is that the wines that you have in front of us today, which are this one you're tasting right now, which has Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, and Tannat in it, each one of those grape varieties have different levels of color inside them, meaning in their skins, meaning there's a finite number of color that you can get out of those skins before you're not doing anything anymore. And those same grapes also have a finite number of tannins. And so I think that might be on the next slide. Let me see if I can figure this out here. Oh, Kelly. I don't see my little clicker here.
Over there?
Well, I used to have a little thing that I pressed on.
Oh, because it's white.
Can I go like this? Oh, there we go. I think I got it.
Okay.
Okay. Real quick, this is just before we get into that, this is just a vineyard map, and I just wanted to show you that besides the Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, and Tannat, these are all the different grape varieties that we have on our ranch. And again, I don't necessarily need you to find out which number is what or any of these. I just wanted to show you that all those different grape varieties all have different characteristics of color profiles, tannin profiles, acidity profiles, whether they have a lot of acidity or low acidity. And that's really what makes wine so interesting. So I just wanted to kind of give you a backdrop of everything that we're doing, you know, what everything looks like. So now getting back to the color by variety. So this gives you a little bit of a broad spectrum overall what I was talking about. So if you look at the top, one of the lightest colored grapes that you can find is Pinot Noir. Okay, and again, I want you to understand that just because something is lighter in color or, you know, any of those things, there's no winner in all this. There's nothing that says one is better than the rest, right? Wine in general is what you like is what is important. And if you like a wine that costs, you know, $4, then more power to you. That's great for you. You're gonna drink at an affordable price. That's a good thing, right? It doesn't matter. Just because Petit Syrah has the highest color of any grape variety doesn't mean that it's good for everybody and that you should like it. That's not what we're saying here. We're just letting you know that your color profile is going to be specific to the actual grape variety. So Pinot Noir, you know, usually in the 150 to 200 range. You can see Grenache is a little higher. Zinfandel gets a little higher than that. Malbec, lots of good color. Cabernet Sauvignon is really interesting. And once again, I should mention to you, when you get into these color profiles, the colors actually do have association with the fruit profile. So the lighter the color, the more red it's going to be. The darker the color, the more you're going to get into really, really dark and black fruit characters. So Pinot Noir is going to be really light in color. You know that, you've tried Pinot Noir. Very light and fruity, very low tannin structure. Grenache is more in the red category, Zin red. Then when you get into Malbec, when you start to get anywhere between 800 to 1,000, 1,200 parts per million of color, you start to get more into the blue category. So Malbec is nice because it's lots of blue fruit, it has low tannin structure, so a lot of people love that wine by the glass at a bar. You go to get to Cabernet Sauvignon, which is, you know, everybody says in this business that Cabernet is king. You've got about 12 to 1,400 parts per million of color, and that's really dark blue. And the reason that people love Cabernet is because they love flavors of dark blue, right? Who doesn't like dark blueberries, you know, blueberries and milk? You add a little oak profile to it, which is cinnamon, vanilla, those characters, and you have dark blue fruits with cinnamon and vanilla. Who doesn't want that? It's a blueberry pie, right? And that's why people love really delicious Cabernet. Petit Syrah, on the other hand, 1,800 parts per million of color. You get Petit Syrah and it's in your glass and it is like, it's black, it's like ink. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but its flavor profiles are generally speaking a little bit monolithic. You get a little bit of like kind of forest floor, you get slate, you get black slate, you get tobacco, and it just, sometimes it doesn't fly with everybody because it's just not what people's palates you know, prefer from when it comes to the standpoint of wine. So, all right, so the wine we have in front of us right now, I thought it would be interesting for you to see what its phenolic content when you go variety by variety. So again, the column on the left is color, the orange column is tannins. So if you look here on a Grenache, you've got low color, high tannins. Okay, in Syrah, you've got high color, low tannins. Mourvedre is generally medium color, low tannins. Tannat is, like I said, saffron. I mean, the reason I said that is because you use just a little bit of Tannat in your wine and it really lifts the whole thing because it's got so much power and so much acidity. But ultimately, when the wine is all done and it's blended, so we ferment these separately, we keep them separate, and then we do a blending trial, you look at the CDP blend on the right of that column, and you've got something that's in really good balance, right? You've got something that's about 600 parts per million of color and about 800, a little less than 700 parts per million of tannin. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to have 600 parts per million of color and 1,400 parts per million of tannin, because then it tastes like you have a sock in your mouth. The tannin levels are too high and it's too dry, right? And this is what we do as a winemaking standpoint to make sure why people blend, why people measure these things, why it's important, because if you don't have a balanced wine that goes into bottle, the wine will never be balanced for its eternity. Even if you set it down for 20 years, it does not matter. It will still be out of balance if you put it in the bottle out of balance, right? So that's what we try to avoid doing. Okay, so let me stop that for a second. To tell you a little bit about us, hopefully that wasn't too much chemistry for everybody there. Stop sharing the screen here for a second. Okay, so to give you a little bit of a story about us, we are a winery that is, I would say, kind of small to medium in production size. We have 2,700 acres on this property, but it's not all grapes. We've got about 100 and now we've got about 200 planted to grapes, a little over 200 planted to grapes. Some of them aren't in full production. And everything comes off of this property. It's what we call an estate property. So we don't really buy grapes from anywhere else. Everything comes from here. And we're a different brand from a lot of people because we don't sell a lot of wine in the wholesale. And what that means is that most of our business, 90% of our sales, come from direct here from the winery or from one of our locations, which I'll explain here in a second. And the reason that's the case is because our farming costs and our overall costs for a bottle of wine are generally a lot higher than anybody else that you'll find in the store. And there's a few reasons for that. One is because when you see our property on some of the photos that we're coming up with, you're going to see it's all hillsides. And when we're farming our property, we can't grow 4 to 5 tons per acre or 6 tons per acre. Somewhere in some places grow up to 10 to 15 tons per acre. And so obviously their cost of farming versus the yield they're getting out of that is really good, right? If it costs them $5,000 to farm it and they're getting, 15 tons, that's a good price. For us, because we have so many hillsides, so many rocks, so many outside issues that come in with the wildlife and things like that, we have a much higher farming costs, and we can only yield about 2 to 3 tons per acre because our soil types won't let us grow more than that. Our soil is very alkaline, so the pH is between 7.8 and 8.2, and so the nutrients can't get uptake in the way most normal pH soil nutrients can. We have a big problem bringing up nitrogen and things like that. And then secondarily on top of that, we're also certified organic. So that brings a lot of cost into play because we have to do everything by hand. We don't use any chemicals. We don't use any pesticides. Everything that we do is essentially natural. We're also what we call a regenerative, which I'll get into in a second. So from that standpoint, basically what happens is that we can't sell the wine in the grocery store or the restaurant. I mean, restaurants are a little bit different, but in the grocery stores at price points that allow us to do that. And that's because we have to sell it to a distributor. So if we sell the wine to a distributor, then the distributor has to sell it to the wine shop, and then the wine shop has to sell it to you, and you've got basically those 3 people taking cuts all the way to a point where we price ourselves out of range. So that model for us doesn't work. So what we did instead is we focus on what we call a direct-to-consumer business. So you won't find us if you're in Texas, you won't find us in Specs. If you're in California or wherever, you won't find us in Costco. You won't find us in Bevmo or Total. You won't find us there. That's not us. We like people to be part of our club program or buy wines directly from us, which is why over the last 5 years or so, we basically opened up some what we call satellite locations. So let me see if I think I'm getting better at this. We'll see. Share. Oh, that's a white one again, Kelly.
What?
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, so hopefully you're seeing my screen right now, and you can see that we have 3 different satellite locations. So the estate is the middle one that's here in Paso Robles. That's in the middle photo that you see there that has our winery tasting room and the caves that go into the hill behind it. The one on the left is our location that's in Fredericksburg, Texas. And so we opened up in Texas in April of this year. It's a brand new opening. We have a tasting room there, which you can see the back patio. Basically, you get all of the wines that we make off of this property at the estate here in Paso Robles. Plus, we do have one wine that comes down there from in Texas. Again, everything's certified organic. And it's a really interesting location because it's off of Highway 290, which is just outside of Austin and San Antonio. So about an hour from Austin, 45 minutes from San Antonio, 4 hours from Dallas. Not sure the distance from Houston, but again, it's a place that people go up there. They call it Hill Country. People visit it all the time. And so we have that location that we opened up in April, which is a really great spot. We're getting a lot of business out of there. We have an executive chef that does lunches there, so you can come make an appointment, have lunch, go through a tasting, etc. The place on the right is our location, which is in Temecula, which is just outside of San Diego, Orange County in Southern California. We bought that location right at the end of COVID in 2020, and we modified it a little bit. And basically, it's a smaller site. It's not as big as the other 2, but it's really quaint. We have a really good team down there. They don't have a restaurant down there, but they allow people to bring food in if they want to come in and picnic. You can see kind of a photo there. They're overlooking our own vineyards that we have down there, plus some other wineries in that location. And what's great about this concept is that it allows you to use all of the memberships for our wine club or buy wines from any of those spots. So basically what happens is if you sign up for a wine club per se, then you get tastings, a certain amount of tastings per month. And if you decide that you want to come to Paso Robles, you can use those tastings here. If you decide you're going to make a trip throughout all of California, you can head down to California, hit up that location. And of course, you get discounts on all of our wine, which we'll go to in a second. But I just wanted to give you an idea that we are beyond just Paso Robles. We have the estate, but we also have our Fredericksburg location as well as our Temecula, Southern California location. All right. So a little bit back about the organic part of it and what we call regenerative farming. So we have moved into a little bit different and unique philosophy of farming. We've been certified organic for a couple of years now, but we've always really farmed organically. But now we're looking in the next month, we're going to get our ROC, which is called Regenerative Organic Certificate. And it's a little bit different process. And so what we do with this concept is that we try to indulge and encompass other things that go around the area. So right now we have the biggest part of our program is our sheep program. So we have about 150 sheep that we use for weed abatement as compared to obviously using herbicides. And so what they do is they graze in the vineyard during certain parts of the year, and they eat all the grass. And what that does is that allows us, or I should say prevents us from having to do tractor passes. Now you say, why would you be doing tractor passes if you don't do herbicides? Well, that's because we have mechanical implements that are mounted on the tractor to get rid of the weeds. But if we can use the sheep to take out those weeds, then obviously we don't need to run a tractor through it, which saves us both in emissions, in diesel, and in labor for that matter, all in the meantime feeding these sheep, and then they're in turn fertilizing the ground that we're pulling our fruit from. So it's really a full cycle approach. That's probably the biggest part of it. We also really limit our tilling, so we don't do a lot of disking because we're trying not to turn over the soil. There's a lot of good nutrients in those soils, and the more you disc it, the more you aerate it. If you can non-till your soils, there's also some carbon sequestration that takes place. So this concept is a little bit, it's more, you're more capable of doing it when you're a property of our size, and we've decided to move forward with it, and it's definitely, a program for us. So that's a little bit about the regenerative part of what we're doing, which, personally I like. I think it's a fascinating thing. Also at the estate here, we're also one of the only country's fly-in winery. So we do have an active airstrip, which goes down right in the middle of our property. It's private, which means you have to make a reservation to fly in. But we do allow small single and dual prop planes to land. We have some housing on property, which I'll see if that's on the next slide. I'll get to in a second here. Come on. This is what I said. House is free. It's on estate experience. Yeah. Okay. So here we go. I'll go back to the estate experience in a second. So we have multiple housing options on site. We have our estate lodging, which basically we have a vineyard view property which sits at the very top of our mountain up here, and it's overlooking our vineyard. And then we also have our pilot's cottages. So if you're flying in, you can stay in one of the pilot's cottages, which are really cool, small little bungalows. They have a kitchenette, a bathroom, a king size or queen size bed. And so you can actually fly in, stay on site. We have an executive chef who can help you with the meals and these types of things as well. So there is actually 2 more houses, but I just put this on for now. But there's a lot of options to stay here if you ever decide to come here. And of course, our experiences on the estate here, which are really worth coming and seeing. So obviously you have the plain on the left, but if you look at the center one, that was one I was referring to. That's the mountain range that we're sitting in right now. And so you can see that our hills and our soil type, I mean, we're on steep hillsides. There's some sites that we can't even farm because they're so steep. And that backdrop that you see on the other side of that is the Pacific Ocean. That's how close we are to the ocean as a crow flies. And so you have the opportunity to take excursion tours, go up into the mountains. We have a barrel and winery tour where you basically pretend that you're kind of going through the whole harvest experience from processing grapes all the way to the barrels that you see behind me. You try wines out of barrels, and then if you finish your flights in the tasting room. So there's a lot of opportunities to come check these places out. And I think we're going to move on to our cab. So take the screen off. Okay, good. All right, so hopefully you got a chance to try the 21 CDP, finish that one up, and I'm behind. Yeah, I talk too much. Oh yeah. All right, so pour yourself some 2020 Cab. I want to talk a little bit about Cabernet in general here. A little bit about why our program is a little bit different than what normally you would see with Cab. So, all right, so Cabernet is kind of, I like to say most people know what Cabernet is. And like I mentioned, there's a reason for that. You've got a lot of blue fruits that are involved in this. And so I'm going to get into a little bit about the wines in general and then go into the color profiles. But I like to say Cab is king, and again, because there's a reason why. Because when you combine blue fruits with some of the things that you see behind me, which are oak barrels, it just becomes an appeasing, pleasing, organoleptic property for people. So the Grenache, for example, that we tried earlier, the 21 CDP, we don't use any brand new barrels. So when I'm talking about brand new barrels, basically barrels do three things for the winemaking process. So when the wine comes out of tank after we're done fermenting with it, right after we've gotten all the color out of it, and we put it into the barrel essentially does three main processes. First, it's a clarification vessel, if you want to call it that, and that happens by settling. So what you do is you put it in the barrel, and over essentially a 16 to 18 month period, all of the solids that were in that wine will end up settling out to the bottom, and then you can use this tool that we have that uses compressed nitrogen to go in and basically take the wine off of the top of all those solids. You clean the barrels out, and then you fill it back up, okay? So it's a clarification vessel, and that prevents us from having to filter the wines, because when you filter the wines, you take some of the color out. And again, remember, the color is your flavor, so you don't necessarily want to filter your wines, or at least we don't. Some people do, okay? Second, these barrels behind me are porous. So they do allow small amounts of parts per oxygen into the wine, and also they let a little bit of wine out. So if you've ever heard that term, the angel's share, where basically you have a barrel like this, it's more considered in the whiskey world, but you're getting some evaporation out of that. And so every month we have to go through and we have to top these barrels because we lose a little bit out, and you don't want that wine to be a little bit lower in the top of that, because acetobacter, which is basically the same bacteria that creates vinegar, will form on the top of that and create a mother culture, which is the same way that you can actually create vinegar. So we don't want that. So by topping it up after it evaporates out and putting the bung on the top, which you can see behind me on that barrel right there, that prevents any gap between the wine and the outside air, so you prevent acetobacter from forming, okay? But again, it's porous, so parts per billion of oxygen are actually getting into this wine and creating more mature flavors and helping polymerization of some of the tannins and colors that you find in wine, okay? So that's the secondary purpose. But probably the most important purpose of barrels, and specifically new oak barrels, is the flavor profile that they inject into the wine. So when this barrel comes from France behind me, it starts out with wood staves, and they basically heat them up and form them, and then they put the barrel together, and then they actually toast the barrel. So the heads, these parts right here are off, okay? And they go in and they toast the barrel with high heat, and it actually caramelizes some of the natural sugars that are in the wood, and it turns them black. And those sugars and that toasty flavor are still in there. And so when you put the wine in there, and you put it in here for the next 18 months, the wine starts to extract those flavors and some of those sugars. Okay, now it's not the same sugar, it's not glucose, fructose, it's more caramelization sugars, which they're non-fermentable sugars, so they create a little bit of the perception of sweetness, along with the toast levels that can create cinnamon and caramel and butterscotch and all the things that come with toasted oak. Okay, so when you have Cabernet Sauvignon, which is heavily in the blue category, and generally speaking, a lot of people, especially winemakers, will put Cabernet in some percentage of new oak. We usually use about 40% new oak on our Cabernet Sauvignon. And you integrate some of those flavor profiles, it's just a really a wine that people enjoy. And that's why we always say Cabernet is king. I mean, Cabernet, you know, is very different throughout the world, but it's not as different as Pinot Noir can be. Like some Pinot Noirs can be really dark, and some of them can be completely light and almost nothing. And a lot of other varieties are the same, but Cabernet is probably the most consistent, which means when you go to a restaurant, if you order Cabernet, you plus or minus know what you're getting, right? At least within some sort of category, right? They're not all similar, but you know what you're getting in a lot of ways. The difference that we have in our Cabernet Sauvignon here is largely because we don't use the traditional blending components that the rest of, for the most part, the world uses in Merlot and Cabernet Franc. So a generation ago, Mondavi went over to Bordeaux and he started talking to all the people in Bordeaux. They grew Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot, rightly so, because their climate is significantly cooler than it is here in Paso Robles and even up in Napa. And Mondavi came back and he's like, we got to plant Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot because that's what they do in Bordeaux. And you know, obviously everybody at that time in the 50s and 60s were replicating what was happening in Bordeaux. They were even now, there's still a lot of Sauvignon Blanc up in Napa, which makes absolutely no sense because it's considerably warmer than Bordeaux, but they planted because that's what Bordeaux had. So they planted a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot, and over time, at least where we are down here, we're slightly warmer than Napa Valley, but not really. We realized that Cabernet Franc and Merlot are really better suited to cooler climates, and Bordeaux is considerably cooler than we are. And the place that they grow the most Cabernet Franc and Merlot is on the right bank of Bordeaux, which is the coldest part of Bordeaux compared to the left bank. And they only make their wines from Merlot and Cabernet Franc for the most part. So again, attributing it to the cooler parts of Bordeaux. So when I arrived here, and also some of the time I used to work at a winery down the road called Justin, we started to slowly move away a little bit from Cab Franc and Merlot because it's just too warm in our climate for that. And so we really emphasize Malbec and Petit Verdot. And the reason why is because Malbec is a wonderful grape if you can grow it right. But in Bordeaux, it gets a lot of what's called shatter because they have really, really rough springs, and the grapes will basically lose their berries, and it became too complicated and didn't get ripe enough for them. Same thing with Petit Verdot. They didn't have enough heat to get Petit Verdot ripe. There's still some Petit Verdot that's in Bordeaux, but for the most part, they don't use it a lot. But here, that's exactly what we have, this wonderful springs and a lot of heat. So we use a lot of Petit Verdot and Malbec for our blending components for our Cabernet Sauvignon. So that's what you've got with us today. I'm going to show you a little bit about the, share my screen here, a little bit about the profiles of the color. So here you go, a little bit about Cabernet Sauvignon. Again, Cabernet Sauvignon, good color, lots of blue fruit, medium tannin structure. The dark color, lots of Malbec, low in tannin, so that's always nice to use as a blending component. Petit Verdot, super dark, super intense. There we go. Get you onto this part. So this is what I like to show because this just gives you a quick glimpse of what those varieties look like, as we already talked about a little bit about the color and the tannin profiles. And again, one of the greatest things about Cabernet Sauvignon is you can grow Cabernet Sauvignon and blend Cabernet Sauvignon on its own because it is blue. You don't necessarily have to blend it, and it's super balanced. It's got a lot of color and a good amount of tannin structure, and it's a beautiful wine that you can do a vineyard designated Cabernet all by itself, without having to blend other things in. We do like blending in Malbec and Petit Verdot. We like Malbec because it's so dark and blue, and we do like lighter tannin structure. When you try this wine, you're going to also find out that this wine is really approachable. We make all of our wines really approachable early on. We don't want you to have to wait 10 years to try these wines. So, it gives you an idea of what we're trying to do here. And then Petit Verdot is blended in basically depending on the vintage. If you have a little bit smaller year of cab, maybe a little less color, a little less tannin, you can beef it up by using Petit Verdot. And we do make a standalone Petit Verdot, but again, that wine is very different. It's a lot darker. The color flavors are a lot darker. Again, they're more slate, black tea, anise, like that's the flavor profile you're going to get for Petit Verdot. But ultimately, the finished blend is the column you see on the right, where you're getting about 1,200 parts per million of color, 1,400 parts of tannins. And for us, that's what you're tasting here, which is beautiful blue fruits mixed with some nice oak, but a very easy drinking wine. Okay, so now I want to compare the first wine you had, which you should do this if you can, with the second. It doesn't have to be right now, but just to show you that the color and the tannin profile of the CDP blend are a smaller wine than the Cabernet Sauvignon, which is on the right-hand side. So you have one wine that's a little bit lighter, a little bit more red fruit, Bing cherry style, and then one that's a little bit more darker and blue. And you can see that that's basically related to the amount of color you have in the wine and the tannins you have in the wine, if that makes sense. So if you had Pinot Noir, you'd be on the left side of that CDP blend and be more like 150 and 200 because it's that much lighter than these wines that you're trying. And again, this isn't a competition. That's not what it's all about. It's just so that you understand. Take this out of here. So that you understand, if you're going to dinner tonight or over this weekend and you're having a fish salmon that has a light red sauce with it, probably don't want a Petit Syrah, right? Because that's really big and powerful and black slate and tea, right? And black tea. That's not really going to pair well with a lighter fruit dish, right? If you're going for a ribeye, or if you're going for a tri-tip barbecue sandwich that has barbecue sauce on it, Cabernet is probably going to work for you. If you're going to go for some paella, then you go for something a little bit more red, like Sangiovese or Grenache, like a CDP would work perfect for that. So that's just to give you a better understanding of what you're looking for. Again, your color will somewhat dictate the flavor profile, and depending when somebody says it's a lighter red, well, that if it's your Assam talking to you, they're probably telling you that it's a lighter red, which meaning it's lighter in color and lighter in tannin structure. So you're going to aim for something a little bit, in the world of chemistry, a little bit what we call smaller, right? Smaller wines are on the left side of the screen that we were talking about. Bigger wines are on the right. So, okay, let me see what else we got here. And then we can get to the Q&A here. So that. Okay, yeah, I should talk a little bit about the winery real quick. So our owner, Hans-Jörg Bies, I like to say, and Dave, Jessica can back this up, he does everything 100%. This whole property goes to his grandkids, so he wants to make sure that everything's done right. So if you ever want to come see a state-of-the-art gravity flow winery, come see us. We just literally last year had Opus One from Napa Valley come down and visit us because we're kind of considered a very prolific place as far as our infrastructure and how well things were built. What's great about this gravity flow winery is you can see that our owner actually, he did a lot of the building of this, and he's really adamant about efficiency. So our neighbors across the street, they have something like, I don't know, 7 or 8 interns, and we have 1 because everything's done so efficiently in this place that we can run our harvest team with only 5 people. So it's really effective. We also have 20,000 square feet of caves that you can see underneath us here. Let me see if I got, yeah, which is where we're sitting at right now. So we actually don't have this completely filled up with barrels because if you look at one of those pictures on the wall or on the screen, we have our sparkling program. So we actually do make some sparkling wine called Method Champenois, which is the same traditional method that they make in France, in the Champagne region. But we have 20,000 square feet of caves that are part of the tour, which is a great thing to come check out, and you have the opportunity to taste out a barrel when you do that tour. So again, all part of the experience of coming to Halter Ranch. And then lastly, I just put this on here in case you're interested. You can join our wine club. You can sign up for that online, or you can contact us. Again, we're not a huge place, so glad to give you guys my email address if you have any questions. Very simple. You can write it down. It's kevin@halterranch.com. Shoot me any questions about all the phenolics we've run today, any questions about the wine club. If you want to buy any of these wines or any other wines that we have on our website today, we can ship to most states, with the exception of Utah, which never allows anything. We're also going to give you guys a discount today. If you put in the promo code EBTRON24, you're going to get 10% off. You can also, if it's easier for you, you can order send an email to orders@Halter Ranch. Again, or you can send it to me, to kevin@halterranch.com. We'll answer any questions you have. And I think Josh said that he would share some of that information as well with you all. He can send you guys a link with some of that information as well. So, all right, so that is it for me.
No questions?
Well, I don't know. I haven't looked yet. I might need some help with here. I don't know. Where's the chat thing? Oh, here we go. I see it. All right. Oh, interesting from Brian. Today is the anniversary of the repeal of prohibition. I did not know that, but I'm going to pretend that we did, and that we did this on purpose for that. What do you think? Good. Cheers to that, everybody. Okay. Let's see. Great presentation. Let's see. Thank you.
Every time I come here, I feel like I'm going to college. You know, I learned something, and I have a plant science degree for whatever it's worth, so it's kind of interesting.
Great question. How long will these wines retain their flavor after opening? So I am going to give you that answer and a little bit more for your own wine education with one big answer, but it's going to take more than 1 second. So the best way I always tell people, if you want to know how long wine is going to last, and I maybe part of me is just the business, but it's always good if you're going to buy a wine, or I mean, I guess you could do this and go back to wherever you bought it from. Buy a wine, you're going to open it up, you're going to take a glass out of it, okay? And then leave it in your house, assuming your house isn't 95, okay? Put the cork back in, just on the top, just like I have back here. Okay, try that wine. If you love it, great. You can drink it whenever you want, okay? The next day, you're going to go back and you're going to try it again, okay? And if that wine is still good to you, that's probably about 5 years right there, okay? That means in 5 years, that's plus or minus what it's going to taste like, okay? Come back the next day, do it again. If it's still open day 3 and it still tastes pretty good, you got probably another 5 to 10 after that, okay? So that tells you how long a wine's going to last. I had a wine 3 days ago. I opened it, first night it was good, the next night it was terrible. So to me, what that's telling me is if I have any more wines of that in my cellar, drink them now, right? That's the whole point of it. And you shouldn't judge these wines based upon anything but whether you like it or not. I think one of the biggest anomalies and problems in the wine business is that people will take what somebody tells them, and personally for me, I'm not a big fan of ratings. We get good ratings, but I don't think that's the way you should buy wine. I think the best way you buy wine is do what I said, open it up. If you liked it day 2 better, then buy 2 bottles and put it in your cellar and put a little tag on it and say, drink it in 2020 or 2030 or 2029, right? If you like it right now, just buy more and drink it right now. There's no reason to hold on to wines and pretend that something needs to age. If it doesn't need to age, there's no need to do it. Just drink it. So as far as these wines that you have here, I'm thinking you're probably a good 3 to 4 days with these, as long as you put the top back in. Because remember, the top is basically, once you pop that bottle open, you've exposed that wine to oxygen. And that's essentially what's happening on a macro scale versus putting it in your cellar on a micro scale. So you only have so much time. Don't shake it around. You can put it in the fridge, but you will have what are called tartrates, which will form. These little white crystals, and for red wine will then turn pink, and they'll end up on the bottom of your bottle, which can change the acidity, because those tartrate crystals are basically some of the acid that's in the wine, and they'll fall out. So I suggest keeping it at as cool of a spot as possible. Again, the other thing that I would suggest for most people, I know that most people's house temperature is usually somewhere between, I'm guessing with everybody here, but 68 to 74. If you're 68, that's a pretty good spot to drink wine. If you're 74, don't be afraid to take a red wine and pop it in the fridge for about 5 minutes, and then pull it back out and drink a glass, or maybe try it and then do that and see. I almost promise you that you will like it better, because the issue with high temperature wines, meaning like in the 70s, mid 70s or so, is that you feel the alcohol in your throat more, and it also amplifies the tannin structure, especially if you have negative tannin structure. There's a reason that wines in a box are asked to be stored in the fridge, because they're low quality and they have acetobacter, VA problems. VA is more perceptible at higher temperature. VA is just what's called volatile acidity, and it's just the amount of acetobacter that actually has started to produce vinegar in there. It's not harmful in any way, but it is a flaw in wine. So that's why the wine in the box asks you to put it in the fridge and drink it out of the fridge. So But that's my suggestion for anybody who wants to figure out how long wines are going to last. And these wines should be good for 3 to 4 days at least. Hopefully that answered that.
That was a good answer.
The location of Temecula is at the old Hart Winery. We want to go check you guys out there. That is correct. That is the old Hart Winery. It's now called Halter Ranch. We did some refurbishing. We've done some things, and it's a great spot. The Harts were great. They were great people who, sold us the winery. They fell upon some hard health times and decided to get out. And it's a great location for us. It's right on the very beginning of Rancho California Road when it's wine country. Not in the freeway part, not on 15, but once you get up into Temecula Valley wine country. And it's a great spot. It's definitely worth checking out. Beautiful views. The team down there, Tessa and her team, do a great job. They're very personable. You can get all of the wines that you can get here down there. So please, come see us. We'd love to have you down there. Great presentation. Thank you. Do you consider Block 22 Syrah your signature wine? That's like choosing children over there. Yeah. I don't know what to say about that. I will say that
a lot of things.
I will say that our owner would consider the Ancestor our signature and flagship wine. I should mention our Ancestor, which is one of our flagship wines. Block 22 is also, so is Cuvée Alice, and so is our Sparkling Libella program. But the Ancestor is a wine that's also made of Cabernet Sauvignon, Petit Verdot, Malbec, and it is named after the largest coast live oak on record. So we have we're Paso Robles, which is Pass of the Oaks in translation. And so we have hundreds of thousands of oak trees around here. And our previous vineyard manager, who's now retired, who retired before, right when I came on, plus or minus, still a great friend of the property. He was really into big trees. He went to see General Sherman and things. I know in South Carolina you have the angel oak, right?
Yeah,
So you should be careful. And so we have one of the largest coast live oaks on record, Quercus agrifola, and one of the local botanists from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, a guy named Matt Ritter, who's an instructor down there. He comes and measures it, and so you can come see the tree. It's one of the largest coast live oak. I just will tell you that Quercus agrifola is different from the angel oak. That species is different. So we have the largest Quercus agrifola, and the angel oak is the largest of whatever it is. There's nobody in there down there. Nobody? Are you sure? I got in big trouble in South Carolina when we said that we had the largest oak tree. I almost got shot. So we have the largest Quercus agrifola oak tree. Whatever the live oak in Charleston, I don't know what the name of that one is. So just so you know. Anyway, he named it the Ancestor tree, and the Ancestor wine is he would consider our flagship wine. So hopefully that answers the question.
Oh, what's yours?
If he is recording this, then I agree with Hans.
Oh.
How's that?
That's fair.
Okay, I think that's it. A lot of great presentations, but no more questions. So,
So this is always special. A lot of you stayed on. This is great. I'm planning on doing it again next year. So as long as Kevin lets me come back, and hopefully I'm going to go outside and get on my computer. Well, I'm not going to go outside because it's getting cold. So I'm going to go.
Do you have earbuds?
No, I'm going to annoy everybody.
Okay,
here.
that's fine. As long as it doesn't bug you.
Oh no,
they'll be quiet.
Nothing bugs me.
Okay.
And so I'm going to move into a different spot, because I know some of you will stay on. Kevin, I've listened to a lot of your presentations.
Yeah.
This is the best one.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I mean, they're all good. This was
Good.
even better. I mean, this is the people that didn't stay with this really missed it.
Good.
But that's because they had to listen to me for 3 hours. So, I mean, I can understand why they ran away too. So, yeah, you got to pick and choose.
Good.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for much. And again, Kevin at halterranch.com. If you got questions, visit the website, halterranch.com. Again, we're a small place. See Tessa, go see Jane in Fredericksburg. Again, if you sign up for the club, you get the benefits at all the locations. So it's really a good program. You also get 20% off on all the wine.
I'm pretty sure I've been here for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dave's going to meet you out front.
Yeah.
Get on and speak with you guys. I'm going to shut down, and everybody have a good evening and enjoy. Cheers.
And happy holidays.
Yeah,
for
you
those of
too.
that
Cheers.
are leaving me.
What? I can't hear you.
Cheers.
Cheers. There you go. Cheers.